That's one thing I'll give the normal Kahuna. He can read just fine. Not like me. But he knows jack squat about introducing something he's working on. So you bring me the ultimate Kahuna. And I'm telling you, 8 p.m. West Coast time, the ultimate Kahuna will give way to the normal Kahuna to do a live reading. You will watch it, and you will enjoy it. Woo!
Normal. Me too.
Kikoman, you're doing it wrong. Woo! And now it's time for a live reading.
Well, hello. How's everybody doing tonight? Yeah, we got Brian McCoppin was first in. Woo! Then we're joined by Mr. Herman P. Hunter, the Lore Forge. And Mr. Everly Music, yes. Our latest host and member of the Iron Seas podcast. Speaking of which, Brian McCoppin will be filling in for me and Bat Sauce this Tuesday, so you guys better check that out. It's going to be a good time. All right, so I had 3 stories I'll be reading here tonight. The first being The Revenant and the Cult, the prologue from that book, kindly provided to me by Mr. Herman P. Hunter. I will be sharing I have links in the description, and I will be sharing them as I go as well. And then the next 2 stories I plan to read tonight include The Shadows of the Argent Tower by Mr. C.A. Pence and The Flower of Light by Miss Allison Wade. Now, I do have some copy-free right music that I'll be playing here in the background, so if any sound quality stuff, as read by Mr. Jordan B. Peterson, you know, Flower of Light, it really represents the light in all women that they can provide to the world. I can't. I'm not Herman. I can't do it, man. But I'll have that music playing in the background. And yeah, I was trying to just set some stuff up. And Herman, I read a little bit of your story. I think I believe red is the appropriate color here. Oh, I should have worn my hood and my robe too. That would have been appropriate as well. But let's just get started. Tell me about the volume of the music and or mine as well, please. There's a revenant and a cult, and the cult didn't make their own damn beds. Thank you, Everly. All right, let's see how that is. All right, guys, let me know if that's too loud. I'm going to turn it down right here just a touch. And can you guys hear that music? Okay, let's see. Yeah, that's better. Okay. We'll do that. Present a nice little image for you guys to enjoy. Share the image. The vile image of the beautiful book upcoming. All right, now we're here. Again, I think I might turn that down just a little bit right there. Howdy animation. All right, guys, I do have music playing. Tell me if it's too loud or not loud enough, because I can't really tell with my own system here. No way to check it easily. Turn that down just a touch. Better. All right. And now we'll get started. The prologue for The Revenant and the Cult, Book 1 of the series. Atop a rocky rise, the crumbling remains of a once mighty fortress clawed at the night sky. A canopy of clouds diffused the light of the full moon, contrasting with the jagged tips of black stone that stood against the pale aura of the moonlight. The moon provided just enough light to reveal the dark points of walls thrown down and shattered remains of high towers destroyed long ago when the fortress fell. This was a place of dread and misery, a long-forgotten memory of an age of darkness and despair, where the ghosts of vile, tormented alike continued to haunt the stony carcass. Once where the cries of the tortured could still be heard in the very stones, their misery saturating the earth. Even in its ruined state, it still stood defiant, like a broken and mangled fist that shook in rage against creation's maker. Below, standing in the woeful shadow of the ruins, shrouded forms gathered. On a level plateau, vague figures were arrayed in a line, all dressed in black, their identities further obscured by cloaks and hoods. All right, real quick, just gonna check in. How's that sounding to y'all? Because I can't quite hear it. Hail, Fu Man Blue! Is the music too loud? Am I too loud? Is it a good balance? For anyone listening, I appreciate it. Hail, Fu Man Blue! Thanks for coming, man. It's a good time. There we go. Maybe I'll just turn it down there. If it's not so loud in my own ears, maybe it's not so bad for you guys either. All right, going back to the story. Sounding fine to me. You don't hear any music, huh? Okay, let me turn this up, maybe. Let me turn this up. How about that? Can you hear that now? Let me see. Yeah, I'll continue sharing though. Still nada. Son of a gun. What am I doing wrong here? All right, hold on. This should work. Let me see. Okay, that's on. So that solves that problem. Let's try those. History. All the way down here. Let's try this. This should work.
Some things you can tips on which neighborhood has the best dog parks or how to find the home that has everything.
Try that.
Bluetooth connected.
Particular photograph.
All right, let's try that. Can you guys hear that? Either way, whether it's playing now or not, I will continue. Because I'm not... Yeah, there we go. Maybe if you cleaned your room, you'd have that music playing there, fella. There you go. All right. Looks like that. Tell me if it's too loud also. Good, good, good. All right. Behind them opened a great yawning maw in the rock face of a sheer cliff. The entrance flanked on each side by fire, as if perdition itself lay beyond. Flames, whose forked and twisting nature lifted skyward, hissed, spit, and roared their discontent. Around the raised plateau, the ruins of the lower fortress lay, walls overturned, stones broken and cast down. Sparse rubble collected into piles, swept away to make level the ground on which 50 mysterious men gathered. An ominous scene amidst the darkness, decay, and unnerving silence. In the distance, the shapes of trees rose, barely visible beneath the scattered rays. There we go. They hid this ancient blight from the world beyond, the remote wilderness providing an adequate shelter for the sinister gathering. Yet the most unnerving aspect of all was the pervasive quiet. Those who gathered did not speak, and the only sound that could be heard came from the pop and crackle of fire. There were no calls of night creatures, no faraway hoots from owls. The long, mournful wail of wolves often heard in the wilderness did not echo in the distance. All was silence and darkness, dead and oppressive. In the distant dark, other forms approached from the west, moving towards the gathering along an ascending lane. At first, they were little more than vague outlines against the shadows. As the stray light of the fire caught them, their numbers were revealed, 4 in all. 4 shapes ascended to the plateau in a slow and cautious march. Their heads moved this way and that, the travelers on alert and wary of what may linger in the shadows that surrounded the lane on which they trod. For something did not dwell there among the lower ruins. Something stalked them like prey, scrambling over piles of rubble and vanishing behind the cover. Dark forms, indistinct, veiled by the night, letting the terrain conceal them as they tracked these unknown and unbidden travelers. The closer they came to the fire, the clearer the features of the wanderers became. Each was roughly the size of a man, though their features varied. 2 of them were tall and lean. A cuirass of leather covered their torsos, their lower thighs protected by leathery straps that hung down like aprons. Articulated strips covered portions of their shoulders and arms, and leggings of leather protected their legs. Swords hung from their waist, secured by straps slung around their shoulders. Long, thready hair as black as pitch hung down from their crowns, their prominent horns ascending from the 4 of their brows, long spikes that rose from flesh and bone. Curved back at a slight angle, twisting slightly along their axis. Sallow-complected, they appeared sickly and pale as the firelight revealed their features. Narrow lids covered eyes whose color was like blood and fire. The flame behind them, fueled by an unquenchable wrath instilled in them by their makers. These were Yerk, as remembered in ancient tales. The first of their kind, and by many accounts the most dangerous of their breed. 2 others followed behind. One was a brute of a creature, very much of the same make as the other 2, but with notable differences. It was broader and taller than its compatriots, its skin mottled both black and green, wearing a shirt of ebon mail and greaves of black iron. Its shoulders were adorned with pieces cast from thick iron that was studded with curved horns along their face. It too bore a sword whose sheath was fashioned from the hide of a boar. The pommel of a weapon resembled the claw of a raptor, whose sharp digits clutched a stone of pure black. The 4th and final Yerk was smaller by far than the other 3, pale like the 2 of its vile brethren. It was slender and hairless. Its garb was a crude mix of hide and tanned leather, with a rough-spun woolen breeches covering its calves and thighs. What horns erupted from its brow were less prominent than the other 3, being thinner and shorter. Yet, the one feature that distinguished it from its companions was an orderly configuration of wicked-seeming runes, engraved into its hide with dark brown ink. Arranged in neat columns and rows, they were covered the creature from head to foot, and as if the whole of its body were dedicated to some occult spell whose meaning had been wisely lost. A conjuration whose trauma was mercilessly forgotten by the world with the passing of darker days. About its neck hung a necklace of thin bones ending in a bleached skull of a small creature. Each vacant void in the skull was affixed a red translucent stone, as dark as newly spilled blood. The Ageless had a name for these queer and diminutive Yerk. Some named Ogogalath in the tongue of the fair folk. These were the most feared among their kind, being the embodiment of greater turpitude. Dreaded and despised, it was a creature sought out and slain upon sight, for the Alani knew all too well the terrors these fiends could conjure. Of these 4 Yerk, there was one feature they all shared. Upon their brow, each bore a distinctive mark raised from their flesh as if it were scarring from a brand. A mark as simple as it was an enigmatic arrangement of 2 rings, one intertwined with the other. As the Yerk approached the enigmatic figures in black, they gazed at the assemblage with a restrained sort of puzzlement. While the identities of the figures in black were hidden by cloaks and hoods, that was not all they wore. Many among the throng wore masks, also black, covering their faces from nose to chin. The only part that hinted at their humanity was their eyes. Some of the face coverings were made of simple cloth tied at the back, while others were elaborately carved from wood and painted black. The graven images etched thereon made being nightmarish in their imagery and expression. Aside from this one detail, the congruents were uniform in dress, with faces obscured. They were alike in appearance such that they could almost be copies of one another. Black, Paline, Anonymous, all save but 3. Of these 3, one might find it difficult to call them men, middling in height. They too were garbed in black, though their cloaks differed from those of the others. Something about them glinted in the orange-red glow of the fire, having the appearance of being made up of a multitude of individual feathers. This was also true of their long dark manes that fell from their crowns, for they too seemed to be mingled with ebony down. Yet, it was their countenance that truly defined them, for their skin was as pale as the moonlight itself. Serpentine eyes with sickly yellow irises stared at the onlookers with an intense, unblinking vigilance. Their noses pushed out like beaks, unnaturally long and hooked. And when they moved, it was quick and abrupt, like the movements of a bird. The 4 Yerk slowed to a halt several paces from the line of dark-clad congregants. The burly Yerk stepped forward and gazed to the left and to the right, inspecting the crowd gathered there. The moments dragging on for an uncomfortably long time. Impatient with the inattentiveness of their hosts, the great dark Yerk sneered, its thin lips exposing a set of teeth that were yellowed, broken, and disorderly.
Is this how emissary and ally is welcomed? Threats and silence.
Its hot red eyes made quick sidelong stare at the line of forms that gathered to greet them. The creature's answer was more silence. From the center of the line, one of the cloaked men stepped forward, wordless, a bare hand extended, the fingers of it silently bidding them to draw closer. The 4 Yerk gazed at one another in bewilderment, each seemingly confused as to whether they should do as they were bid. Then, with furtive steps, the Yerk moved forward in unison. As they neared the center of the line of men, it slowly broke. some circling around the grim visitors, causing each of the horned fiends to twist about with anger and alarm. Standing alone, the hooded figure raised its hand once more to bid the Yerk to halt. There, where they stood, more details could be seen at the opening in the face of the cliff. The entrance was engraved about the fringes, fox beams carved and shaped into the natural stone of the cliff face. These rose upward and inward at a slight angle, connecting to a third vertical bar, also shaped from the stone of the cliff. Within each hewn beam, horrid ruins were etched, the stony depressions barely visible in the available light. Contained by these decorative beams was a great black yawning void, hinting at a much larger space within the cliff face. The man who commanded the Yerk in silence was taller than the rest of the assembly. The fabric of his garb was finer make than those of the others, his robe seeming to shimmer in the light of the fire, stuffed in a sash cinched about his waist as a weapon of sorts, a dagger whose hilt stuck from a crude sheath made of hide. Standing only a few paces away from the four Yerk, his hands pulled back the hood that hid his face. Open sleeves slid down along his forearms, exposing pale skin that had not seen sunlight for some time. No mask adorned his face. Dark eyes stared out arrogantly from beneath his brows, his face and his head shaved. On his lips was the hint of a sinister grin, as if he knew a dread secret unknown to all who gathered there. The other two metal ground against stone as the large mottled Yerk knelt on the ground. It turned its head to the Ogogolath and growled, "Summon forth the master." The other two Yerk laid hands on both horns and shoulders of their leader, maintaining a firm grip. The Ogogoloth approached from behind. From a pouch tied at its belt, the Ogogoloth drew a single stone that was pure black in the glow of the firelight. Its sinewy fingers wrapped around the object, palming the stone tightly in its fist. With its free hand, it pressed its fingers and palm into the crown of the dark Yerk. Eyes closed, head back, the shaman began to chant, mostly in whispers at first. Over and over the Ogogoloth repeated the strain, each round increasing in intensity. The hard and guttural tongue of the creature growled and grumbled as if it were spewing an endless font of blasphemies in a tongue too foul to repeat. The kneeling Yerk began to struggle. The more the shaman chanted, the greater the intensity in the thrashing of the companion on whom its hand lay. The other who held down their leader struggled to maintain their grip. Before long, the words of the Ogogoloth were like vile shouts into the air, the Yerk leader letting loose a long, baying scream, a pitiful sound suggestive of beast just before the slaughter. As if the ritual continued, the world around them was drowned out by chanting and screams reminiscent of an ancient thing rising from the abysmal depths. The diffuse moonlit aura in the overcast seemed to dim in reply. Then came a profound silence. The struggling ceased. For an instant, all existence seemed to hold its breath. The two Yerk who restrained their comrade pulled away, reaching out of fear. Yet, the Ogogoloth maintained its grip on the scalp of the large Yerk, steam leaking out of the tight digits on the hand that clutched the stone. Eyes still clenched shut, the Ogogoloth inhaled as if drawing its first breath. Then, the kneeling Yerk opened its eyes. The red irises and sickly yellow that surrounded them were now painted a glossy black. Whatever life those terrible orbs once held was now supplanted by something else. Something beyond mere flesh and bone. A dark, menacing aura projected from them, revealing a horrific majesty that did not exist before. The head of the Ark leader turned to one side, and then the other, its hands balled into fists. All the while, the Ogogoloth's fingers seemed to fuse to the back of the leader's head. Eventually, those cold black eyes fixed on the priest. And when the large Yark spoke, it did so in unison with the Ogogoloth, as if one dominant voice spoke from them both.
I am here,
said the Yerkish pair. The two harsh voices of the conjoined Yerk mingled with a third that transcended both. It was a voice as deep as the ocean depths, and as dark as secret desires of lustful men.
Summon him, priest,
commanded the possessed Yerk, lifting its finger and pointing to the bald man who stood patiently before it. The priest nodded. Casting off his cloak, he pulled the dagger from his belt. The blade of the knife was faceted, rough, and shone like black glass. Holding up the crude weapon to his face, he eyed the edge, scanning each crag where the excess stone was napped away. Despite its primitive construction, the blade itself was thinner and sharper than any implement of steel. Having deep, wide eyes, the hand of the priest trembled. Once haughty eyes now seemed tinged with fear as his fingers flexed upon the wooden handle of the stone knife. For a time, he paused, perhaps as if mustering the courage for the task he was assigned. Slowly he turned to the open maw in the face of the rock behind him, before breathing deep one last time. Afterward, he made a slow path to the gloom that lay beyond the opening, disappearing into the darkness. Sounds were heard coming from that void in the stone, horrible rending sounds followed by the sickening noise of gurgling. A faint cry was noted, born of pain, before a dread silence fell. A quiet so deep and terrible that it felt as if the world itself were ending. From the impenetrable darkness there came a figure in the vague shape of a man, whose eyes shone with a pale, menacing light. As it stepped out of the cave, the details were made clearer. It was the priest who entered the cave only moments before. Yet now, the great jagged gash rent the skin from his throat, curving from ear to ear. His pallid skin was now like bleached bone. The distinct mist of a shadow formed about him, the ribbons of it wrapping around the wicked gash, a crown of black fume hovering over the man's shorn head. Soon, all of the congregants in attendance fell to their knees as if in terrified obedience. Some fell to their faces, fearful to lift their eyes. Even the two Yerk who flanked their companions looked down or away from the terrible reverence that emanated from the broken peat priest. This oozing, nameless evil whose likes rarely came forth from the deep shadows. When it spoke, it was like a shout, a whisper, and a scream conjoined.
Why hast thou summoned me?
Said the transformed priest, his slow and purposeful walk coming to an end mere paces away from the gathered Yerk.
Why dost thou linger in the west, when thy throne lies in the east? Why dost thou disturb me in my shelter?
Target circle is free to join. And you get deals automatically?
Here I have come, that you might remember your vow to aid me in the task I must do, uttered the joined Yerk.
If you're not making 100,
To what end?
but you'd like to,
Head back, the figure of the priest gazed down in seeming condescension at the Yerk.
To what end?
The mouth of the dark Yerk curled into a snarl, and its face churned with a distant rage at being that possessed. The conjoined creature spat out this question.
It is now my time and a vow you have taken. As you aided Hoshakar, you shall aid me. Thou shalt fail,
Replied the priest, his face calm and expressionless.
shall I? It has been foreseen. Has it?
The expression of the Yerk changed, turning coy if not slightly amused, as if the thing that possessed it knew something the other didn't. When the possessed priest did not reply, the coy expression turned into one of rage. With an accusatory finger, it spat curses through quivering lips and teeth like a viper might spit venom.
Oathbreaker, snake, a covenant we all made long ago, and now you turn your back on your brethren. Curse me if you will,
Answered the priest.
it will not change the fate laid upon us all. Thy time is at hand. My time is yet to come. Our bond shall not undo our fates. Not shall I imperil such plans as I set in them to motion. Seek ye the others at aid thou needest. There are no others,
Snarled the Yerk.
there is one.
Answered the priest.
Mindless and heedless is he.
Replied the Yerk.
This you know.
The mist above the neck of the priest coiled and curled as the pale glowing dots for eyes stared patiently at the Yerk, as if whatever presence possessed the dead man was deep in contemplation. Then it spoke once more.
Show me thou shalt hast revealed. Only then shall I grant thee aid. In what form shall your aid be delivered?
A tense silence followed as the two figures glared at one another, as if their stares grappled with not grappled with that of the other. Both were resolute and unafraid, neither willing to yield.
Show me thou offerest. I will aid and deliver to thee.
The dark Yerk growled.
Were it not for me, you would not have that tame dog who comes to heal when you call. Or have you forgotten?
I will not lay my plans at thy altar. A bond I must fulfill, and so I shall. Yet I will not do so blindly. Show me, only then shall I grant thee aid.
The eyes of the Yerk narrowed, and its lips drew close, almost into a scowl. For a long time, whatever power possessed the creature considered the bargain. The Yerk spoke this time, resigned, but with anger and iron lacing each of its words.
I will deliver that which you bid, and when I have done so, you will hand over that you follow, and they shall do my bidding, lest you be cursed and undone. So it is agreed.
Then, with a sly smirk on its lips, the Yerk spoke spitefully and haughty.
O great Malzozel.
The eyes of the priest opened wide, as if a grave and profane thing had just been spoken. He recoiled then and raised one arm in the air, fingers outstretched, and the palm grew a spike of shadow and pale malevolent light. Hazy at first, it took the vague form of a sword, the fingers of the priest enclosing about the hilt. Then, as swift as lightning strikes the earth, the sword fell, cleanly severing the head of the kneeling Yerk from its body. At once, the Yerk conjurer fell back dazed, the head of its dead comrade still fused to its fingers. As the headless body of the Yerk leader fell forward, vines, twisted and terrible, broke from the ground. They bound the feet of the remaining Yerk and wound about their calves. Woody tendrils and creepers rose and rapidly entangled the remaining horned fiends, binding their hands and wrapping about their shoulders. Eventually, the pale pink and brown extensions penetrated their mouths, stifling their cries and holding them fast. Powerless, struggling to break free, the three Yerk worked fruitlessly to escape their bonds. As they did, Malzozel stepped forward and drew to one of the tall, lean creatures. The sword the priest held vanished like dust in a maelstrom. The insidious glow from his eyes scanned one of his helpless victims with an inquisitive, almost scholarly expression.
Ah, thou art an ancient thing,
said Malzozel, scanning one of the pale Yerk up and down.
Wrought by the will of Hashogar.
Lifting his pale fingers, it traced the mark it bore on its forehead, seeming to relish the act.
What grim glories thou'st seen? What deprivations hast thou suffered in our fall? Exquisite and sorrowful,
he said as his cold fingers caressed the pale yellow skin of the bound creature, running along the length of its jaw. The Yerk tried to pull away, its eyes bulging in terror. The knot that penetrated its mouth stifled both words and screams.
Yet thou art his creature now,
muttered Malzozel. With a sigh of disappointment, he added,
and I pity thou days are long suffered, and here.
and that is the prologue for The Revenant and the Cult. Holy smoke. Hey guys, how's it going? I once again want to thank Herman P. Hunter, the Lore Forge, the man, the myth, the hedge, for allowing me to read this on stream. I haven't read it before. I only read a small portion in the beginning to get a feel for the story beforehand. But I really appreciate everybody coming to listen. For those who need to take off, I completely understand. And I'm going to post and grab the link for his book real quick. I'll stop sharing that screen. There we go. Let's get a brighter color in here. That red light and occult BS is not comforting in the dark and red. Let's see. The Revenant and the Cult. Now available for pre-order. Here we go. I'll share the link for his paperback. Here we go. It's also available on Kindle for $3.99 and paperback for a little bit less. Thank you, man, Animation. I really appreciate it. Quite a mouth. Yeah, some of the male Zozale. I don't think that's how it's pronounced, Herman, but I appreciate it, man. Hail, Wrangler! I'm gonna hit my mic. Yeah, no, I appreciate it, everybody. Thanks for stopping by. This is just the first of 3 stories I'll be reading tonight. And here is that should hopefully be the working link for his Amazon pre-order page of The Revenant and the Cult Book 1 in the series. It's good. Last year I read The Revenant and the Tomb, and it was one of my favorite books that I read last year. And when if I ever put together a tier list of Iron Age books that I've read, it will be damn near the top of the list, if not #1 spot. So once again, Herman, thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to read this on stream. And if you ever need help with promotion or anything else, you know I'm your guy. And once your book comes out, I'm sure I'll have you on my show again. Hail, chat! Wrangler, thanks for coming by, man. Still can't super... Well, yeah, I'm 420. Thank you, Wrangler. No, you have to have, I believe it's 1,000 subscribers in order to gain monetization. I think it used to be 10,000, but YouTube want more money, so here we are. And last I checked, I was at about 524 or 525 subscribers, just ahead of someone I'm in a secret competition with. So there's that. Now, I'll take a vote. What do you guys think? Do you guys want to hear the portion of the book, The Flower of Light, by Miss Allison Wade of Italy? Very pretty book. It was showed up on Wednesday, Comic Shop Wednesday. When I was on there, Royce read part of it, part of the prologue. I will be reading part of chapter 3. And then there is the unreleased book by C.A. Pence, Shadows of the Argent Tower. He says it's pretty dark. So whatever you guys... you know what? F it. If you guys don't give me an answer that I like, I might just do what I want anyway. Just hit 100 the other day. Hell yeah, Herman. That's great, man. Fantastic. No, I like your YouTube videos. You have a fun one, man. It's gonna be good. But I think we are going to read The Flower of Light, Book 1 of the Eternal Stones, by Miss Allison Wade. Now, good for you, she has provided some images for me to look at whilst I discuss this. I think we'll go with this guy right here. Yeah, we'll do that guy right there. Let me see. Present, extra screen. Uh-oh, can I not show it? Oh, that would be a dang shame. Oh, that's disappointing. Okay, let's see. I can bring up the images over here. So let me see. Go down to Allison. We'll go with this one. Okay. Now I'll present that screen. There we go. Haha. Oh, James, how's it going, man? You missed me reading the prologue for The Revenant and the Cult by Herman here. And dude, it's so dark and so otherworldly, so mystical. I was really impressed by it. It was a lot of fun to read too. Besides me trying to pronounce names that cannot possibly be real. Oh, Animation, thank you for sticking around, man. God bless you, and have a good night. I really appreciate you coming by. All right. Now, is it on Audible? Two of Herman's other books have ended up on Audible, so I assume they will be at some point. And I believe you've even confirmed that to me also. But alas, I'm going to be reading The Flower of Light by Allison Wade, and I believe we are going to be reading from the 3rd chapter. You see, this is good music. I can turn this up a little bit. Chapter 3, Magic. In the night, lying in an uncomfortable bed in the room he shared with Berth and Greystone, Jonathan couldn't fall asleep. The fight had sobered him up, but it hadn't exhausted him enough to make him collapse. Besides, he couldn't get the thought of what happened out of his head. That girl, the magic she used, the symbol on her face. It was something he had never seen before. He knew about magic, had been to the shows of traveling illusionists, visited the temple, and seen the rituals honoring the sun. Nothing had ever come close to what the blonde girl had done in that alley, because he had felt it. It was a surge of boiling energy that had taken his breath away for a moment. It had reverberated inside him and left him extremely confused. That sense of premonition he had felt since they entered the village had resounded in his head like a call. And the strangest thing of all was that it almost felt familiar. He shook his head. It wasn't like him to get lost in such reverie. Maybe it was just the tension of confrontation, the taste of danger. Maybe he needed some fresh air again. He got up, trying not to wake the others, who seemed to be sleeping soundly. He was wearing only his breeches and a shirt, but at the last moment, he thought it would be a good idea to at least bring his dagger. Not that he intended to stray too far, he just wanted to clear his head a little. He stepped out into the hallway that led to the stairs, but a sudden thud brought him to a stop. It seemed to come from the room where the prince was sleeping. The moon in the sky was a sliver, but its faint light barely came through the windows. Yet he remembered seeing that window closed when he had made his last round before going to sleep. The noise of something metallic falling, this time unmistakable. He saw a black figure push out of the prince's room. "Hey, you!" he yelled, reaching for his dagger. As soon as it heard him, the figure moved its hand as if to throw something. There was an explosion, and suddenly, the corridor was filled with fog. "Guards!" called Jonathan, before a coughing fit made it difficult for him to breathe. He couldn't see anything around him and felt disoriented. He had no idea what the figure was, but he soon found out when he felt someone grab him from behind. The knight's body reacted instinctively. He tried to break free by elbowing backwards. He heard the man's groan as he was hit, and felt him loosen his grip. But he also felt a sharp pain in his back, something tearing through the light fabric and piercing his flesh. He lunged. Let's see, where'd it go? He tried to lunge forward and spin around to put his dagger between him and his attacker. He didn't understand why it was so difficult for him. He could only see fog. But he could hear the voices of others and the sound of footsteps. His cries must have awoken them. The figure in black slipped away in an instant. Jonathan tried to find the prince's room. "Your Highness!" he called out. He was so disoriented he couldn't even figure out which way the door was. A warm liquid soaked the back of his undershirt. He felt an uncomfortable burning sensation between his shoulder blades. He was wounded, no doubt about it. As he struggled to breathe, he noticed the fog beginning to clear. Among the voices around him, he heard a moan. It was close. Jonathan followed the direction of the sound but saw no one. His feet stumbled over something. He bent down on one knee, feeling around by his free hand. Prince Bran was lying on the ground, his neck and chest drenched in blood. More came out of his mouth as he tried to speak. "Your Highness!" cried Jonathan, blindly searching for the wound. He found a gash in his throat. He pressed on it with both his hands. "Guards!" he shouted again, so the others could reach him. But as Bran Bluand convulsed and choked on his own blood, Jonathan heard footsteps approaching. "What's happened?" He recognized Greystone's voice. "The prince has been stabbed!" shrieked Jonathan. Someone finally brought a lantern. "Go find a healer!" Greystone ordered one of his men. "You're bleeding too, John," another one said, but Jonathan couldn't figure out who it was. His mind was still confused. He was out of breath, but he had no intention of moving from there. He knew he couldn't remove his hands, but he also knew it was too late. The prince kept gasping, his airway obstructed. The knight's head was crowded with thoughts. What could he do? Was the enemy still there? If the prince kept bleeding like that, he had little hope of making it. Why couldn't Jonathan do anything to save him? Why did he always have to watch those around him die? He closed his eyes, pressing on the wound. His hands now sticky with blood, labored breathing, heart pounding in his head. The prince's brown eyes were wide, terrified, and fixed on him. He, who was his only and last hope, who was meant to protect him. He should have saved him. And now that he had failed in his duties, all he could do was press on that damn wound, facing the inevitable, as if he really could have changed things. There's nothing more to be done. It's too late. You can't save him. Just as you couldn't save your brother when he sacrificed himself to protect you. You can't do that, said a stupid voice in his head. "Hang in there, Your Highness," he said aloud, clinging onto one last thread of hope, while he felt the life leaving the prince's body. "I can't accept it," he repeated to himself. But there was also another voice. It kept whispering a word to him, restlessly, in a language he had never heard before. Jar. What the hell did that mean? Why now of all times? Jar. "What is that? On his face?" noted someone, maybe Berth. Jonathan didn't know what he was talking about. He only knew to say that word. "Jar!" he spat out. It was like releasing an oppressive weight. It was like a burst of light. Light filled his body and emanated from his hands, enveloping the prince as well, shaking him. Brain's eyes widened, and his mouth fell open to take in one last breath. He turned to the side, escaping Jonathan's grasp, while the knight remained there, too, stunned, overwhelmed by what was happening. The prince spat blood on the floor and then resumed breathing. Long, fresh breaths, interspersed with coughs. He sat up, touching his neck. Only a dark spot remained where the blade had pierced him, but there was no wound. He stared at Jonathan, dumbfounded. And Jonathan stared back at him, unable to explain what he had just done. It looked like magic. "Are you all right, Your Highness?" asked Lawrence Gendon, stepping in and helping the prince to his feet. Someone else pulled Jonathan up by the arm. "How the heck did you do that?" Greystone watched him with incredulity. "I haven't the slightest idea," Jonathan murmured, looking around confused. Yet, He felt invigorated. That sense of fatigue and stinging pain in his back had completely disappeared. He took off his shirt and found an excessive blood stain and a gash in the fabric at the back. What the? He searched for a reflective surface to examine himself with. He found a silver mirror amongst the junk the prince had scattered on the nightstand. Squirming, he tried to touch and look at his back, and nothing. There was absolutely nothing. No wounds, just dried blood. He stepped into a chair, running a hand through his blonde hair, still in disbelief. What on earth happened? He muttered again. I'm fine, I said, shrieked the prince, fending off Gendon's hands, which were still searching him. This is absolutely outrageous, he exclaimed furiously. They tried to assassinate me, right here, half a day away from the Imperial Court. My cousin will hear of this. Did you see who it was? Asked Lorenz apprehensively. An assassin in an inn full of guards, Brian snapped. What kind of a coward attacks a man in his sleep? I am mortified, Your Highness, Gendon continued. But the important thing is you are here unharmed. I will send the guards to investigate. The prince chased him away, waving his hand, then turned to his men. You pack everything and get the horses ready. We are leaving immediately. I will not stay a moment longer in this horrible place. Jonathan was about to go retrieve his equipment, but Lorenz held him back for a moment. Sir Silverheart, forgive me for asking, but are you a warden? Jonathan looked at him, puzzled. A what? A warden of light. I noticed your star. My what? Lorenz shook his head. Don't mind me. I think at the Imperial Court they will be able to give you an explanation for what happened. I hope so, Jonathan replied, setting off to prepare for the trip. And that is all she gave me to share. Ladies and gentlemen, did you like my princely voice, or was it too over the top? Cuckoo, ka-choo! Hail, A.C. Pritchard. How you doing, brother?
Hail the Iron Age of media.
Oh, wait, we got to do this right.
Hail! A.C. Pritchard of the Ilk of Iron Seas.
How are you guys doing? I had to wait until the ebook showed up on Amazon. Ah, okay. Getting it registered. Oh, so Herman, if you're still here, is your book going to be available upon release on Audible as well, and or other audio book websites? There we go. So that was chapter 3 of Flower of Light, book 1 of the Eternal Stones by Miss Allison Wade. I've I interact with her quite a bit on social media, and I really enjoyed the portion of her story that we read. It is kind of interesting how dark despite the frantic scene that we just left, it was not nearly as dark as the scene I read previously. So it's always interesting bouncing from one story to another. And Herman says, yes, it will be available just about everywhere.
Hell yeah, boy!
That is fantastic. All right, so that's enough of that. I'll stop sharing that screen. Get rid of this. And, well, I can show her little promotional thing as well. Here we go. Where'd it go? Aha! There it is. And this is the promotion for The Flower of Light. Book 1 of the Eternal Stones by Allison Wade. To know more, visit eternalstones.net. And she wishes she could be here. Unfortunately, she lives in Italy, and it is the very, very early morning for her. So, Allison, I hope I did your small portion of the story justice. And thank you for the opportunity to read this fantastic book. I already own this book here in paperback, and I look forward to reading it here more very soon. Actually, I enjoy this kind of story. It's a little bit lighter than some of the fare that I read, but I'm very excited to see what happens. Is this an English translation from Italian? No, James, I don't. I'd have to check. I don't believe so. I believe she does. She does know English. I'm just not. But that is a good question. I'm unsure if she had to translate it as she went, or whether she knows English well enough just to write it in English. It's a great question. Mr. B.S. Warren, howdy, howdy, howdy who? How you doing, man? Oh, I love reading, man. I love stories. And I didn't grow up listening to audiobooks, but as I got older, especially, maybe 5 or 6 years ago when I started reading again, when I got married, I stopped. Don't know why. I fell in love with the written word being read aloud by someone with real talent. I'm nowhere near that yet, but someday I'd love to be there. I think of all the stories that I was read as a young child by my parents. To this day, I cannot or will not listen to anyone else read Harry Potter because as a young child, I heard it. I will read it myself, but I will not listen to the audiobooks because I got so enraptured hearing my mother read it to me as a young child. It was a really special thing. And I try to do that with my own children, despite short attention spans. Oh, B.S. Warren. I'm doing great. I'm looking up this book right now. I like the cover. Oh, I'll post the link, man. I have it around, or I will momentarily. Let's see. The Flower of... Oh, not Flower of Light by Miss Allison Wade. What the hell is this? Okay, I need to add the whole thing. It's showing me lamps. Here we go. Oh, and she does have it in hardback for anyone who prefers that. This is the link for her Amazon page. Very, very exciting. Her hardcover looks great, by the way. Some people, their hardcovers are like, oh, why would I buy the more expensive book when it doesn't look better? There we go. There we go. That is a link to her Amazon page for The Flower of Light, Book 1 of the Eternal Stones. And now I have a story I know very little about. I know it's going to be dark, and that is going to be Shadows of the Argent Tower by C.A. Pence. Wow. Oh, that's a pretty lady. That's what I like. Let's see. There we go. Now I'll share that. I'll turn the music back on, and we will continue. I should read another Hawaiian story here, too. Maybe I will, depending on how long this particular portion is. Present. Share screen. I think I need a different lighting for this, too. It's going to be... Let's go with purple. I think purple's the right choice, if it works. Ha ha! There we go. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. There we go. Shadows. And now I'll look this up. Where'd it go? There it is. Get rid of the prologue. Shadows of the Argent Tower. All right, now I'll play this one more time. Shadows of the Argent Tower. Prologue. Birth of a Demon by C.A. Pence. Birth of a Demon. Prologue. It was the continuous, ear-piercing, blood-curdling screaming that pulled her back into the realm of consciousness. It was the scream that woke you up at night, ready to fight or run. Danny did not jump up, nor did her awakening happen quickly. She faded back into existence into the dark world behind her eyelids. Her body was still heavy, unwilling to bend to her desire to move. Something in the haze of her own mind recognized the peril and tried to pry her eyes open by pure will. Bright, blurry light filtered in, her eyes still not focused enough to gather in the details. She tried to shake the blur away, but stopped when a sharp pain throughout her head caused her to grit her teeth. Instead, she sat still, allowing her eyes to rest a moment while she took in information with her other senses. The first thing she noticed was the subtle mix of several unique perfumes, alongside the clean smell reminiscent of a hospital. She heard whimpering and sobbing of several women off to her right. The screaming had stopped, a fact that brought her little comfort. She felt the dull ache of her back as metal bars dug in. Her hands rested on a cold tile floor. She tried to rest her eyes open once again. It was blurry, but she was making out some details. She could see the bars in front of her as well. Between them, the blurred semblance of bright white walls. There was a grayish counter with various objects she couldn't yet make out. A bright manila blob caught her eyes. A wave of relief washed over her. Perhaps not all was lost after all. She rolled her head away from the bright light and into the darkest corner. The image of the women huddled in the corner came quicker. They were of all shapes and sizes, ranging in age from their teens to mid-20s. Only one of them showed any sign of pregnancy. The oldest-looking one sitting in the cage's corner. Despite the woman's condition, she comforted another girl that couldn't be a day older than 16, that was sobbing in her shoulder. Her makeup ran down her face in streaks, but was the only sign of distress that she wore. Danny blinked a few times and glanced out of the corner of her left eye to test if she could handle the light. The various instruments on the counter marker, they were in a lab. She turned her head to confirm the manila blob was what she had expected. That was her folder, filled with images, documents, and files. If she could only get to it, everything would be worth it. She worked movement back into her limbs. A metal door on the right side of the room opened, allowing two men in blood-splattered lab coats to enter. One got out a key, unlocking the cage, and opened it. One man grabbed the young woman and pulled her away. The elder woman tried to hold on and pull her away, but she slid across the tile as she pleaded to let the girl go. The girl herself screamed and kicked as she grabbed onto everything she could. Their pleas and fighting had no effect on the man. His face remained placid and emotionless through the entire ordeal. The older woman glanced over at Danny with expectant eyes. A pang of guilt ran through her as she made eye contact with the woman. In her current state, there was little she could do against two grown men. Even if she was in full health, she might be able to conjure a spell or two to take them out. But there were surely others nearby. Besides, her primary task was to get that folder. She couldn't do anything that might jeopardize that. She looked at the woman and frowned. The woman must have read the message in her expression because she tried to crawl to the cage door before the man absent-mindedly slammed the door. As the pregnant woman crawled back to her corner, she gave Danny an accusing glare. Danny ignored the woman and moved into crouch since there was no standing room. All the movement caused sharp pains in her head, but she knew she had to hurry if she wanted to get out. She moved to the door of the cage and rattled it, but it wouldn't budge. A scan of the room showed two doors, and the two men brought the young woman to the metal door. It had a small window, but it was so opaque from abrasions, she couldn't see anything through it from her angle. On the left side was a normal-looking, solid wooden door with no windows on it at all. The manila folder was in the middle of both, but closer to the metal door. A quick glance at the other girls showed they were watching her with curiosity. Even the pregnant one stopped glaring at her for a moment. She sat on the ground and moved to the spot where she woke up. Just as she leaned back against the wall, the screaming began again. The tears streaming down the girl's face came unbidden to her mind. Her heart sunk to her stomach. She wiped the tears off her eyes before anything could escape. She went over her plan again to tune out the screams as she worked to relax her body against the wall. It wasn't until the screaming stopped that everything came together. She watched the metal door as silence hung in the air. Even the whimpering of the other occupants ceased. Only supreme willpower stopped her from jumping up as the metal door burst open. The two men came over to the cage. One pulled out a key, unlocking the cage, and opened it. The other reached in and grabbed the pregnant woman. The woman fought and pulled. She grabbed the bar on the side of the cage to anchor her. She held on despite the man trying to pull her away. The other man walked over and pried her fingers from the bar. The woman looked at Danny with pleading eyes, but Danny didn't react. Despair set in the woman's eyes. She let go and didn't bother to fight as they led her to the metal door. As soon as they let go of the cage door, Danny burst into action. She jumped up and thrust out her foot to catch the door before it closed. This time, the door flew back and slammed into the ball of her foot. A sharp pain that jolted up her leg following a crunch. She gritted her teeth against the pain for a moment. Then she slid close to the cage door until she could push it open further with her hand. As she shuffled out of the cage, she used the door to pull herself up and held her now throbbing foot in the air. She tried to hop on one foot over to the counter while still holding the cage door. Instead, she hopped forward, almost falling. She reached the counter, but the sudden clang of metal caused her to jump. "Save the many, not the few," she told herself as she let out a deep breath before unwinding a string securing the folder. Hold on, this commercial's almost done. Ugh, annoying. "Save the many, not the few," she told herself as she let out a deep breath before unwinding a string securing the folder. Inside there were photographs, documents, detailed lists of times, and a couple of crystals containing video. She heaved a sigh of relief when she noticed everything was still here, tied it closed, and tucked it under her arm. She would not get far on one foot, so she gingerly put weight on the other. Satisfied when she found a position that was bearable enough that she could limp along at a good pace. She limped over to the wooden door. As she reached for the handle, it turned on its own accord. She hopped backwards, putting more weight on her right foot than she should have, and almost collapsed to the ground. The door opened, revealing a hulking beast of a man who took up most of the doorway. His crimson-stained wife-beater hung off his body in strips, revealing deep gouges in his own flesh. The gouges were neither healed over nor bleeding. In fact, the stains on his shirt were in all the wrong places. He emanated a heavy, blazing feeling, as if the surrounding air was melting. It dug deep into her soul, and pulled out an intrinsic, primitive terror, the kind lost to those civilized by the modern world. The terror of prey staring down its natural predator. Most who stared down a demon would either find themselves unable to move or uncontrollably break down, fleeing recklessly. Danny, however, trained to fight against this feeling. She had never felt it quite this strong before, but it was familiar enough to keep some composure. The demon reached to his belt where he sheathed an array of knives, pulling out a large butcher knife. He swaggered forward with a manic grin upon his carved face. She looked around him and calculated the chances of her getting past. They weren't good. Her eyes scanned the room for anything that would help. There were various implements on the counter, scalpels, saws, and drills. Judging by his body, she doubted any of them would help much. Then she saw it. On the table was her mage gun. She reached out with her mind. It was still loaded with a firebolt spell she placed into it before they captured her. She snatched the gun off the counter and pointed it at the demon and pulled the trigger. A red bullet fired from the gun that exploded into a bolt of flame. The bolt blasted through his chest, causing a large hole with burns around the edges. He looked down at the damage, then snarled as the wound healed, with fresh, unscarred skin. As soon as the flesh finished healing, he lifted his left arm, reached over with a butcher knife, and cut the newly formed skin. This gash looked much like the others, and failed to heal up like the hole from the shot. The lethal shots would not get her anywhere. She fired a bolt through his right thigh, another through his left shin, then took advantage of the moment he took to heal his legs, pointed the mage pistol at his head. She took a sharp breath, then pulled the trigger. The bolt fired true and straight towards his head, but the bullet hit the hand holding the butcher knife as he blocked the bolt with inhuman speed. The hand exploded, causing the demon to scream silently in rage. With his left hand, he grabbed at the butcher knife now lodged deep in his right eye. She didn't stand by to watch him pull it out. The way he flailed made it impossible to get past, but she still had one more option left. The metal door was just behind her was not great, but it was the best shot she had. She hobbled to the door, flung it open, and hurried inside. In her rush, she slipped on the slick floor and tried to catch herself on her right foot. Her leg crumpled beneath her, and she landed on a sticky, wet floor. The crimson liquid now covered her face and soaked into her clothes. She tried to get up using her arms, but they slipped, failing to give enough purchase to stand. She settled for kneeling and looked for where her mage pistol was. It had skidded underneath an operating table and sat in a pool of blood beneath it. To the right of the table was a pair of black boots, peeking out from under once white robes. She followed the robes up to see cold black eyes staring her down through a pair of spectacles. A surgical mask and a cap covered the rest of the face and head. In his blue-gloved left hand, he held a small lump of flesh, in the vague form of a human. The woman she had been dragged into this room only moments ago lay on the operating table, bereft of clothing, arms and legs strapped down. Her once accusing eyes now stared blankly at Danny, with a permanent expression of agony. The sudden splash broke her from her trance, and out of the corner of her eye she noticed a figure in blue scrubs approaching from the side table, blue-gloved hand clutching a scalpel. When he reached her, he roughly grabbed her by the armpit and tried to pick her up onto her feet. She took a deep breath to focus, then formed a spell inside of her. It was a rush job, considering the situation. She didn't want it to go off while she held it. She activated the spell in her hand. The blood on it bubbled and steamed. She grabbed onto the man that was holding her. He screamed in pain and let her drop to the ground again as a sharp pain slid across the left side of her face. Half of her vision went black. She felt a fresh trickle down her cheek and heard a drip as her own blood joined what covered the tiles. She gripped the spot where her eye once was and screamed out loud. "Stay your hand," a calm, dignified voice said. "There's no use killing her just yet. We may make use of her. Laceration. Please restrain her for me." Massive hands lifted her up in the air from behind, holding her with a vice-like grip. They were as cold as steel on a winter day, but produced a burning heat under her skin. She knew struggle was of no use when she saw large fingers covered in tiny gashes. She hung helplessly in the air as she watched two men in scrubs remove the woman from the table, her eyes holding a prophecy of Danny's near future. As soon as they finished removing the corpse, the robed man pointed to the metal tray where he placed the fetus. "Take this to the lab and have them extract anything useful. Then take the rest to the others so they can do whatever it is they do with these." The man she burned nodded, picking up the fetus, and walked past where she was being held. The robed man gestured for her captor to come to the table. He lumbered forward and unceremoniously dropped her upon it, causing pain to well up in all of her injuries at once, while the remaining man in scrubs secured her arms and legs to the table. With her legs splayed out, she had to stall him to come up with a plan. The folder was still laying on the ground where she fell. She just needed time to think of something. She forced herself to pick up her head and look at the robed man with her only remaining eye, and said, "The tower knows everything, Blackmore. Your time is up." "Oh, is it Miss Venera? Oh, by everything, do you mean that little message you sent on your tome? Lord Blackmore is behind it all." "Hardly incriminating evidence," he said, looking down at her with an amused expression in his eyes. "I send that and go missing. What is everyone going to think?" She forced a cocky smirk onto her lips. Now, Miss Venera, do you really think the tower will risk making a power play over circumstantial evidence like that?" he said, then paused, looking down where she had fallen. "What you have in that folder, however—" "You! Grab that folder off the ground and bring it to the immolation. He'll know what to do with it." Danny's heart sank further as she heard footsteps move to the spot where the folder fell. She needed to stall him further. "My source told me there was more where that came from. The tower won't stop looking. They'll find it." "Your source had a major medical problem that required an immediate operation. I'm afraid he didn't make it. Which brings me to what I'm going to do with you. I'm afraid you've been a major thorn in my side, Miss Venera." Blackmore looked away and brought his pointer finger to where his lips would be. Then he snapped his fingers as he looked back at her. "You know, while you are here, I might as well check you. You never know what young people are up to at this age. No use wasting perfectly suitable material." He picked up a long, thin, yellowish, clear crystal rod from his tool tray. At the bottom of it had a plastic handle with a digital readout and a couple of buttons. "Recognize this?" "I see by the look in your eyes that you do," he said before putting the rod back down on the tray. She sensed, as he unbuttoned her blood-soaked vows from up to her navel, and her skin crawled as he firmly pressed the crystal rod against her abdomen. He brought the rod back up to his face and pulled down his surgical mask with the other hand, revealing neatly trimmed salt and pepper beard, while studying the now glowing green digital readout. After he peered down his nose at it for what seemed like forever, he turned to her with his lips twisting into a cruel smile. "Well, Miss Venera, it seems congratulations are in order. And that is the end of the prologue of The Shadows of the Argent Tower by C.A. Pence. Thank you all for coming. How's it going, boys? Let's see. Doing great. Hail, B.A. Turner. How you doing, brother? Oh, AC, you and I, we're going to need to talk with C.A. Pence. Make sure he's okay. That's a dark freaking story for the prologue. Oh, there we go. I'm glad he used words that are a little more YouTube friendly, like fetus. It's like, yeah, there's violence happening in each of these stories because stories are generally about conflict, and good stories usually involve physical conflict as well. But it's very interesting. I felt like a roller coaster. We started off with the ominous Revenant and the cult. Then we went to the adventure and the assassination attempt and the magic of the Flower of Light. And then we ended it with the Shadows of the Ardent Tower by C.A. Pence. What a tremendous... Yeah, this is a tremendous bit of stories here. I don't think I'll read any more tonight, just because I don't know how many more stories I could do justice with my voice right now. But I will share with you guys the link to the pre-order of his story, the last one I just read. The Shadows of the Argent Tower by Mr. C.A. Pence, available for pre-order here. Also, guys, this is not something I'm able to do all the time, but I do love reading your stories, and I do love sharing your stories with others in this way. Someday I'd love to do a full audiobook for someone and learn how to do that, because I think that's something that would be of tremendous value to people here and this community in general. So if you guys have any suggestions, any ideas, or if you know of anyone who would like their story read in this fashion, please share it with them. It would mean the world to me. And God bless. Kahuna, out.